Welcome back, everyone. We're breaking down UFC Fight Night, Makhachev versus Green. Real unfortunate. We lost the original main event. Was going to be a very fun fight between two high-level grapplers. But, kudos to Green for stepping in short notice against a very tough opponent in Makhachev. Got to respect how game Green is, coming in short notice for this fight. But I do have to admit, it's just not as hype as the original matchup. But we'll make do with what we have here. The rest of the card's not too bad either. I mean, it's got a lot of pretty fun prospects here. We got Tsarukyan versus Alvarez, very fun prospect fight. And then we got a ton of other prospects on this card as well, like Bahamondes and potentially Rodrigues versus Petrosyan. Should be a banger. So the rest of the card, looking pretty exciting as well. Not too much name value, but I'll take it. Really not going to complain too much here. But I do have an announcement before getting too ahead of myself here. Going forward, I think I'm probably just going to do the recaps for the previous event in another video. Had my work schedule moved around a bit recently, so the timing of things going to be a little weird. But the thing is, most of the time I have the podcast 90% done before Sunday, and usually I'm just waiting on after the event to do the recaps and stuff. So going forward, I'll probably just have it ready to go early Sunday morning, and then do the recaps maybe the day after. That way I can get the podcast out a little earlier. Also, we'll be able to get into the meat of the breakdowns without having to spend 15-20 minutes over the recaps and stuff. So going forward, that's probably how it is. I'll still upload the recaps just a little later in a separate video for all two of my listeners who who care about it. But without further ado, let's get into this card. We have 12 fights here. Hopefully no more fall off. But yeah, let's get right into it. And in the next fight, we have Victor Altamirano versus Carlos Hernandez. And Hernandez is the minus 120 favorite. Come back on Altamirano is plus 100. And interestingly, both guys are coming off of split decision wins on the Contender Series. Somehow both are on this card now. But we'll start with Altamirano. Pretty well-rounded fighter from what I have seen. Pretty high output. Will move forward and throw volume. Has shown he can mix in some of the wrestling as well. And have seen him push a pretty hard pace. So I think the cardio is solid. And I have seen him go 5 rounds on the regionals as well. The thing I do have to say about him, though, is he seems to have pretty bad takedown defense. He does get stuck on his back quite a bit. I think in every fight I've watched, he's been taken down and held on his back, for not an extended portion, but, a good chunks of the round. And, if I'm being honest, I was a little surprised he won the Contender Series fight. I was a little surprised he even won the fight before that, on the regionals. I believe it was against Smith, where he was giving up a good amount of control time. I think he gave up a takedown in every round, was held for, at least 1 or 2 minutes every round as well. So I was a little surprised to see him win both those fights, but, I guess he was doing a little more on the feet. That said, though, I don't know if that's something that's going to continue to hold up. And I guess he is coming off of a split decision win, so maybe one of the judges did see it the other way. Regardless, I don't think he's a terrible fighter. I think he's just someone who does seem to have a pretty bad habit of getting stuck on his back. But I will say this also, he is pretty aggressive off his back, so it's not like he's just laying there. He will, throw elbows up. He will look to throw strikes, when he's on bottom. It's just the optics aren't really all that bad. And I think I've actually seen him get bailed out a couple of times with the stand-up. His opponent's not really doing much, so he gets stood up and basically, gets a free stand-up there. So I don't know if that's going to continue to hold up. I don't think that it's going to be something that he can rely on too much going forward, at least not at the UFC level. Anyways, his opponent, Hernandez, primarily a striker as well. I've seen a bit of offensive grappling from him, but I haven't really seen him shoot too many takedowns. I've seen fights end up on the ground, and he does seem to have, pretty decent top control and such. But I don't know if he's someone who will proactively look to wrestle, which, I do think would benefit him a lot in this fight. Seeing how bad Altamirano's takedown defense is, I do think there's a path there. But even on the feet, I think I favor I favor Hernandez a little bit more. I think on the feet, Hernandez is a pretty slick, dynamic striker. Actually, he's got pretty good counter punching. Seems to fight pretty well off his back foot as well. So I do think on the feet, I do favor Hernandez a little bit more. Hernandez, the cardio seems pretty solid as well. He's someone who will throw a lot of volume as well. So I think they should be pretty evenly matched in terms of like the cardio and the output, but I do slightly edge Hernandez in the striking, and I do think if the fight does hit the ground, I do favor Hernandez there a little bit more. So, I kind of like Hernandez in this spot. I think he's just a little better everywhere. I think that, on the feet, I think his striking is a bit slicker, and I do think he does a slightly better job of keeping his hands up, whereas with Altamirano, he kind of relies a little too much on the head movement, keeps his hands kind of low. But I think the main thing really is just the fact that he spends way too much time on his back. You take him down. He doesn't try too hard to get back up. He's content to just kind of throw strikes on bottom, which, I don't think the optics are great. And, I do think that the top game of Hernandez is pretty solid. So, if this fight hits the ground, I do favor Hernandez there quite a bit. So the pick for me is going to be Hernandez in this fight. And, where it is now, I think, at minus 120, I think it's worth a small poke because I do feel that Hernandez is just slightly better everywhere. And when that is the case, I do think he should be able to win, a pretty clear, at least, 29-28 decision here. So give me Hernandez, and give me Hernandez by unanimous decision. And in the next fight, we have Ramiz Brahimaj versus Micheal Gillmore, and no odds on this fight just yet. Brahimaj is coming in short notice, so this fight only got booked, I think, a day or two ago. Gillmore was originally slated to go up against Parsons, but Parsons withdrew, obviously, and so Brahimaj coming in short notice, but no line yet. But we'll start with Gillmore here first, which, not much to really say about this guy, honestly. I really don't think he's that good of a fighter. He's primarily a striker, but honestly, on the feet, he's really only got a few heavy leg kicks, not much else to speak of. He does seem to be able to crack a little bit. We did see him sting Petrosyan a little in that fight, but he really showed zero killer instinct, pretty low volume as well. And on top of that, I think the guy's ground game and jiu-jitsu is just a massive liability. He's been subbed in pretty much all of his losses, minus the Petrosyan loss, which, he just got pounded out in. But prior to that, I think all of his losses are, via submission. But yeah, the guy just seems completely lost on the ground. And, he's going into a fight against Brahimaj, who's, I'd say, pretty much sub or bust. So I think he's up against it here. Brahimaj, not a great fighter either, but, if there's one thing he is good at, it's, hunting the submission early. And I believe all of Brahimaj's wins are pretty much first round submissions. I think he does have a couple in the second round, but for the most part, Brahimaj is doing his best work when he's able to get his opponents to the ground and just submit him there. So this is a pretty straightforward breakdown, pretty straightforward matchup. We have one guy who, excels in submissions and another guy who is pretty bad on the ground in Gillmore. So, stylistically, this is kind of a nightmare matchup for Gillmore here. Brahimaj has shown that against these lower level guys, he can just rip him to the ground and submit him, like we saw in his fight against Plotnikov. Plotnikov, not really UFC caliber, was able to just take him down and find the submission early. And, he was doing that pretty much in all of his regional fights. And Gillmore is someone who I really don't think is UFC caliber. And even on the feet, it's probably going to be a pretty close fight. Gillmore, is pretty low volume on the feet, can crack a little bit, but outside of just having some really heavy leg kicks, he doesn't really offer much either. So, on the feet, I don't even think that he's going to be able to beat Brahimaj by a wide margin, if at all, because Brahimaj, I really don't rate his striking all that highly. Brahimaj is kind of plotty in there. He's kind of slow and pretty low volume himself. I think Brahimaj has definitely got some cardio concerns, isn't able to really push a pace, and, outside of that first round, he hasn't really shown much either. So, this fight could get kind of dicey if it was on the feet, but I really don't expect Brahimaj to keep the standing for long. I do expect him to look to get this fight to the ground as soon as possible, look for that submission. And again, even if it does get extended, I don't think it's completely a lost cause for him. So, I do like Brahimaj quite a bit here. I don't rate him all that highly, but on the other hand, I really don't rate Gillmore all that highly either. So I think this is a submission spot for Brahimaj. I think he gets it done in the first round. As far as how I'd line it, I'd probably line Brahimaj at least like minus 180, because I do think that, the submission is going to come pretty easily for him. And the only reason that I am not lining him any wider than that is because, if the submission doesn't come, we could see him slow down and it could just become just a very low pace striking match. And I really don't rate the striking of Brahimaj enough that, he could win decisively in this fight. So And on top of that, Brahimaj is coming in short notice. Suspect cardio, so we could potentially see Gillmore do a bit of damage on the feet over the course of 3 rounds. But I really do think that Brahimaj gets the submission early, so I might poke that. But I don't think I'd be playing the Brahimaj line. I suspect when it comes out, it's going to be pretty juiced. So the pick for me is going to be Brahimaj in this matchup. I think he gets it done. Round 1 submission. And in the next fight, we have Alejandro Perez versus Jonathan Martinez. And Martinez is the minus 220 favorite. Come back on Perez is plus 185. And we'll start with Perez, primarily a striker in there. He's coming off of a submission win over Eduardo after a pretty long layoff. And prior to that, he has a knockout loss to Song Yadong and a decision loss to Cody Stamen. So, losing to pretty solid fighters. The guys he's beaten are pretty decent as well, but if I'm being honest, I just have not been super impressed with what I've seen from Perez. He's a little flat-footed on the feet, a little heavy on that lead leg, but as far as his offensive striking, he's got a lot of just single strikes in there. Very much one and done with his striking, and I don't know if he's got a ton of power either. He is someone who will occasionally bite down and swing in the pocket, but by and large, he's not a very a heavy hitter or someone who's got a lot of volume either. He was getting outstruck by Johnny Eduardo in his last fight. And this is a 40-year-old Johnny Eduardo we're talking about. And a big reason he won that fight was just because Eduardo gassed out. And, at that age, at that stage in his career, Eduardo just does not have the cardio to fight more than a round and a half. But with Perez, I don't think he's a terrible fighter or anything, but I really just don't think he's that good. I do think maybe he is UFC caliber, but at the end of the day, I don't know if he's going to be, making too many waves in the division. And, he's going up against Martinez, who I think might have a slightly brighter future. Martinez, very good striker in there. Very good kicking game, very good distance management, good movement there. He's got a great use of, just the front kick, low kick, body kick, you name it. When it comes to the kicks, the guy is able to go all 3 levels, really good with the attritional damage. And he's got decent hands, but, really his kicks are really the core of his offense. Overall, he's got pretty decent output as well. But, there are some concerns on the Martinez end. Potential chin concerns. He did get knocked out by Davy Grant. Grant can crack in there, but even before that, he was getting hurt and dropped by Sukumtat. So, I do think that the chin of Martinez might be a little bit of a liability, and it does look like Martinez has struggled with the weight cut before. So, this could be something that is going to be nagging at Martinez going forward. And lastly, this is a little more abstract, but, when it comes to the kicking of Martinez, it's just kind of hard to know how the judges are going to score it, because some judges, they'll score the kicks a little more, but sometimes they don't, unless you're doing some serious damage with the leg kicks. Sometimes they'll just favor, the body work or the headhunting of the opponent a little bit more, which, has led to some pretty close fights on the Martinez side, right? Of course, there's the Ewell fight, which went to a split. And to an extent, I'd say the Ping Yuan Liu fight, I know he got the knockout in that fight, but, was pretty hairy up until then. It wasn't the most eventful fight, so... the style that Martinez brings, it could lead to fights much closer than they should. And, going into this one, I do favor Martinez. I do favor the volume and the attritional work that he does. I think the lead leg of Perez is going to be there to be chopped at. I also think that Martinez, he's going to have a higher work rate in there. So, he's going to look like the more busy fighter. But, there are a few concerns as well, potentially. Martinez getting cracked. Perez is someone who will bite down and throw heavy in the pocket. So, if Martinez hasn't really shored up that part of his defense, we could see him potentially getting hurt. But outside of that, I don't see too many paths to victory here for Perez. So, official pick for me is going to be Martinez here. I think he wins via decision. It's probably not going to be a blowout, but I do think that Martinez should win pretty decisively. I think it's going to be one of those fights where it's close but decisive for Martinez. So, yeah, give me Martinez to win via decision. And in the next fight, we have the Juice Bowl between Jinh Frey and Hannah Goldy. Winner gets to fight Ariane Carnelosi. I'm sorry, but anyways, Frey's the minus 185 favorite. Come back on Goldy is plus 160. And we'll start with the favorite in Frey first. So, she is primarily a striker, but I do think she's got a bit of a grappling game. On the feet, she's kind of low output, but, does seem to be somewhat heavy-handed. I don't know if she's really out there, knocking people out, but I do think she hits moderately hard for the division. In that last fight against Yoder, I believe it was the power that really won her the fight. It was a pretty evenly matched fight on the feet, lots of pretty even exchanges, but I think in terms of optics, it was some of the heavier shots that Frey was landing that, kind of won her the rounds. She did show a little bit of wrestling against Gloria DePaula, but, I don't know if you can really rate that too highly. DePaula seems to have a pretty terrible ground game, pretty bad off her back, and Frey was more or less just able to lay on top of her for pretty much all of round 1 and round 3. I do think the cardio of Frey is a little questionable. I don't think it's terrible or anything, but I do think she does a really good job of pacing herself and kind of masking that a little bit. We saw in the Gloria DePaula fight, she hit that takedown early. I think she spent a bit of energy there and then basically took all of round 2 off, kind of let, DePaula, keep it at striking distance. And, she just kept, just kind of played it safe that round to kind of, recover her cardio a little bit. And then round 3 aggressively went for the takedown and was able to finish the round up on top. And, we saw in the Hansen fight, she did a great job of stuffing takedowns early in the fight, but as it progressed, I think her cardio started to take a bit of a dip, and Hansen was, very aggressively attacking the takedowns and eventually was able to get her down in the second round, grind her out for most of that round, and then eventually find the submission in the third. So, I don't think that Frey's got like horrible cardio or anything, but I do think she slows, and she's kind of gotten away with just fighting at, really low pace. So that's just what I think about Frey there. She's going up against Goldy, who's primarily a striker as well, who's shown also a bit of wrestling. So, very similar in terms of their skill set and build. But Goldy, she's more of like a volume striker. I do feel some of her volume stats are kind of inflated in the Kelly Robbins fight. I say this every time I break down a Goldy fight, but I don't think that she landed that many significant strikes on her. That said, though, she does keep a pretty high work rate. She is very mobile in there. That said, though, she does give up a lot of size in most of her fights. And this is, I think, one of the few fights where she's not giving up too much size. Her reach is, I think, some of the shortest in the UFC, so she does have a pretty big a reach disadvantage to overcome most of the time. Fortunately, in this fight, I think it's only like 2 or 3 inches, so definitely one of the more well-matched fights for Goldy here. She's not going to be at a serious size disadvantage. But, Goldy is someone who will generally look to kind of stay on the outside, work her kicks, just throw some pitter-patter shots, honestly. And, we did see her mix in some of the wrestling in the Belbita fight as well. So, she's moderately well-rounded, decent output, decent cardio. So, both fighters, I think, bring pretty similar, tools to the table here. But I do think maybe the cardio of Goldy might be a slightly better level of competition. That I definitely have to favor Frey here. She did, fight in Invicta for a while, was the champ there for a little bit, but, I don't think that it's by like a wide margin or anything. Goldy definitely a little more green, but I really don't think that there's a massive skill gap between the two, even though Frey does have a little more experience. But stylistically, I think they match up pretty well. I think they're kind of evenly matched on the feet. I might give Frey a bit more of the power advantage, but she's kind of plotty and kind of slow in there, honestly. Hannah Goldy, not much better, but I do think that she's got slightly better volume, slightly better output. Both seem to have a somewhat well-rounded game as well. Really, the only edge I give Frey is going to be the experience. Obviously, Goldy hasn't really fought anyone of note, hasn't really beat anyone of note either. But if I had to pick a side here, I definitely do edge the experience of Frey, and I do think that on the feet, she could probably land some of the heavier shots, or what appears to be some of the heavier shots. But again, I do feel it's going to be pretty close, because I do think that Goldy's got a decent work rate. Even if she's not landing all of the shots she's throwing, it definitely looks like she's doing a little more. And, we could see the movement of Goldy give Frey some trouble landing cleanly. And on top of that, I think I do rate the cardio of Goldy a little better. And if she decides to work in some of the clinch or, grappling, she could probably make Frey slow down enough for Goldy to win possibly the second and third round, because I do believe Goldy was starting to pick it up in that third round against Belbita after getting pummeled for the first 2 rounds. So I do think Goldy's got, potentially better conditioning, better cardio, and for that reason, I do think she can make it a very close fight. So official pick is Frey. I think she could potentially edge it, but no way I would recommend laying the minus 180 on her. She's not someone that really ever wins convincingly. All of her all of her wins, I'd say, are pretty close fights. She's got a number of split decisions. In Invicta, I think on the regionals as well. Goldy, not a great fighter either, but she is an absolute dog in there, as we've seen. So she'll bring the fight to Frey. So if I had to bet aside, it'd probably be Goldy, maybe Goldy by decision. But yeah, I would not recommend laying the juice on Frey here. And in the next fight, we have a potential banger between Terrance McKinney and Ziam. A fight that's been rebooked, and I'm glad it was, because I do think this is going to be a pretty fun fight. But Ziam's the minus 130 favorite. Comeback on McKinney is plus 110. And we'll start with McKinney, who's pretty straightforward to break down. He's a really fun fighter, all action sort of guy, very much kill or be killed. He starts very aggressively. He's going to look to just throw bombs in there early, or either just look to get his opponents to the ground. Very explosive takedowns. And once he gets his opponents there, he's very aggressive. The guy's really just looking for the finish at all times. Seems to really only fight at one speed. But I guess the problem with that is he does usually leave it all on the table in that first round. Come that second round, he will slow down pretty significantly. We saw that happen in the his Contender Series fight against Sean Woodson, where the guy had a very dominant first round, and then ended up beating a flying knee because he was slowing down so much that he was telegraphing a lot of his entries and stuff. So yeah, McKinney is, I think, an absolute juggernaut offensively, but I do feel he needs to do a slightly better job of pacing himself, because once he does take that step up in competition, if he isn't able to get his opponents out of there in that first round, it could get very hairy for him. I do feel if he does pace himself a little better, he could give a much better showing, because he's still very young in his career. He does seem to have pretty heavy hands, pretty good wrestling. I think with some improvements to some of the game planning, he could have a pretty successful career, honestly. But it remains to be seen. He's still been able to just get guys out of there. So for all we know, he could potentially have made adjustments. Because ever since his loss to Woodson, he hasn't really been tested beyond that first round either. He's been able to knock out most of his opponents, but he still is young and early enough in his career that he could be making those adjustments to his game. And his opponent Ziam is primarily a striker in there. He's very tall, very long for the division. Uses his length pretty well. Does a good job of feinting. Good use of the jab. Good use of the kicks to really keep his opponents at bay and measure distance. The thing with Ziam, though, he's kind of low volume on the feet. He does kind of look for the perfect shot a lot of the time. He is someone who is, very, measured in there, but, it does lead to a lower output from him. And, we have seen him struggle quite a bit with the defensive grappling. He does a decent job of trying to work his way back up and work in, in those positions. But, we have seen him controlled significantly against the cage and on the ground. I believe in all 3 of his UFC fights, he was controlled for significant amounts of time. Somehow was able to get 2 wins still, even though both of those wins were very contentious. So, his striking is solid, but he hasn't really been able to keep the fight there for extended amounts of time. But here's the thing with Ziam. He is pretty young in his career, and like McKinney, I do think that, he's young enough and early enough in his career to be making big improvements fight to fight. And, after his fight with Don Madge, he did show, better takedown defense and a slightly better get-up game against Malarkey. And, we saw a little more improvement between the Malarkey fight and the Vendramini fight. So I do think that Ziam is making, improvements in that aspect, but he's going to be up against, I think, the best wrestler so far that he's fought in McKinney. McKinney's, I think, a very explosive wrestler, and on top of that, McKinney does have a lot more power than some of the guys that Ziam's fought. But while this fight is pretty straightforward, it is kind of hard to really cap McKinney here because from what we've seen so far, he is very much still a one-round fighter. We really don't know what his game plan is going to be, if he's going to come in guns blazing early or if he's going to pace himself a little bit more. But, I am leaning on him looking to be aggressive early like he always has. There isn't a chance that he does come in with a much different game plan, but just going off of what we've seen so far, we do expect McKinney to come out aggressive early. And, I do think that the early finish is very much live here. Ziam, I think, is the more technical striker on the feet, but McKinney is much more explosive. We saw Vendramini, land a heavy shot on Ziam, was able to hurt him. And, if someone like Vendramini is able to do it, I definitely think that McKinney can as well. And I do think that there is potentially a path in the grappling also for McKinney. We could see him just shoot a blast double in there and just pound out Ziam on the ground. But, if he isn't able to get Ziam out of there early, I do think that we start to see Ziam pick it up and maybe even finish McKinney later in the fight if McKinney's, completely gassed out in there. But the official pick for me in this fight is going to be McKinney. I really like McKinney to get it done in the first round. I think stylistically McKinney does pose a lot of problems for Ziam. The big thing with McKinney really is just going to be the pacing and the cardio. But I think that on the feet he could land something big, and I do think that if he goes to the wrestling, goes to the grappling, he will have a lot of success there as well. It's just that I don't know if I could really trust the cardio of McKinney at this point. And fortunately, I might not have to because there is a pretty good chance I think this fight does finish in that first round. So give me McKinney here and give me McKinney by round 1 knockout. And in the next matchup, we have Josiane Nunes versus Ramona Pascual. Another short notice fight. Josiane's original opponent wasn't able to make it, so Pascual is coming in short notice. And no line for this fight, and honestly, I don't know how to line it myself. Wasn't able to find too much tape on Pascual here. I think I was only able to find one fight, and that was her fight with Jinh a few years ago. And from what I have seen, it looks like she does have a Muay Thai base. Really likes to work in the clinch, really likes to spam those knees to the body. Did a lot of damage in that second round to Jinh, and it looks like in Pascual's most recent fight, she was able to finish an opponent with knees to the body. So that's probably like her go-to. She kind of seems like a bit of a one-trick, if I'm being honest, but it's kind of hard to say since I don't really have much, info on her. Don't really have a lot of tape on her. So from just that one fight and what I have seen on her record, she looks like someone who's really just going to look to spam knees in the clinch. But what I saw from the Jinh fight as well, though, is Pascual is kind of hittable. Jinh, a much smaller fighter, was able to land a few clean shots on her. But outside of that, I really don't have much else to add or say. But, taking a look at her opponent, Nunes, absolute bulldozer of a woman. Very short, very stout, but lots of power. And, I did kind of discount some of that power going into the Bea Malecki fight. At the time, I'd felt that, Nunes was just fighting a lot of, cans, essentially. And, she wasn't going to be able to maybe have as much success, or, some of that power might not be able to translate. But she goes out there and just absolutely starches Bea Malecki. And this is kickboxing champ Bea Malecki, which is an absolute joke, by the way. Probably just some backyard league or something. But anyways, it does look like some of the power does translate. And Nunes is someone who is very aggressive in there. She will just plod forward and chuck bombs in there. And on top of that, Nunes does seem to have pretty good killer instinct. If she notices that her opponents are hurt, she will swarm them and just unload on them as well. So I do think that, as far as women's MMA goes, she does seem to have some power, some killer instinct, which definitely good for the division. I have seen her stuck on her back for extended periods, but I'm not sure if that will be too big of a factor here. I haven't really seen much of a ground game for Pascual, and, coming in short notice, I don't know if she's even going to look to grapple. But taking a look at this matchup, I think that Nunes just starches Pascual in here. I really did not like what I saw defensively from Pascual. Granted, it was a few years ago, but, I really don't know how many improvements she's making. Since then, she's only fought 2 or 3 other times. So I'm not sure if the improvements are going to be there. And if they're not, I think that Nunes is going to find the chin of Pascual and just put her out. So, if I had to line this fight, and, I'm not saying this is going to be a real accurate line, but probably Nunes minus 200. Pascual, I don't really think is UFC caliber. I don't think she's shown much to suggest that she is. She's been pretty inactive, and she does look pretty one-dimensional, but who knows? Maybe she's able to get her hands on Nunes and just spam knees in the clinch, hurt her real bad that way. Or maybe she's got a little bit of grappling. She does have a submission on her record. She's able to take Nunes down and lay on top of her, because it does look like Pascual is a decent-sized featherweight. She definitely looks kind of thick in there. And, Nunes going to be giving up a lot of size in most of her fights, but, she is very strong in there. But, if somehow Pascual ends up on top, we could see her just getting a lot of control time from that position. But yeah, I don't know. This is a really weird fight, honestly. But official pick for me is going to be Nunes by round 1 knockout. And in the next fight, we have Ignacio Bahamondes versus Rong Zhu, and Bahamondes is the minus 260 favorite. Comeback on Zhu is plus 220. And this should be a pretty fun fight, because Bahamondes is a very fun, exciting fighter to watch. He's a striker through and through. He's got very high output and pace, very dynamic striking overall. Does a good job of mixing it up. He likes to throw in the spinning attacks, and is actually coming off of a highlight reel KO, a last-second spinning wheel kick on Roosevelt Roberts. Overall, the guy's just a really fun fighter to watch. Non-stop aggression, moving forward, and just throwing. Of course, the downside to that is he is kind of hittable, and that's kind of the nature of it. When you're that aggressive, you're going to leave a lot of openings for opponents to capitalize on. But the thing with Bahamondes is he's very tough, and he will throw a ton of volume, so he's going to be able to usually outpace his opponents and be able to take back a lot of what he dishes. So all in all, I do feel that Bahamondes is a pretty solid offensive striker. I think he's going to be a pretty tough matchup for people just because of the sheer volume that he throws out. His opponent, Rong Zhu, not as impressive a prospect, if you can really even call him that. He's kind of low volume on the feet, a bit more of a counter puncher. Does seem to have a bit of power, but I don't think we've really seen it on display at the UFC level. He's done well on the regionals, but those guys very low level there. But he is coming off of a solid win off of Jenkins, although it was a pretty ugly fight. I thought he probably could have gotten the finish a bit earlier. He had Jenkins in a few bad positions. I think pretty early in the fight, I think in the first round or early second round. And I think that just showed some of the greenness in Rong's game. And, it's understandable. He's still very young in his career. Spent most of his career on the regionals just crushing cans. And now that he's over at ATT, he's kind of developed a few more wrinkles to his game, which, is good to see. But overall, I don't think that was a super impressive performance. I feel he kind of got the finish on Jenkins anyways, because Jenkins was, pretty gassed after that first round and a half. Jenkins was coming in short notice on that fight, but it's still good to see a bit of improvement on Zhu Rong's side, considering, he's still very, very early in his career. And to see him be able to mix in the grappling like that was a positive regardless. That said, though, I'm still not that high on him yet. He's still very young in his career, and I do think he's got some potential. But right now, just don't think he's that good of a fighter. And, he's going to be in a pretty tough fight here against Bahamondes, who's really going to bring the fight to him. And, I do think that Rong's got a small path to victory here. Bahamondes is going to be moving forward. He's going to leave openings, and, from what I have seen from Zhu Rong, he's got a bit of power, and he's got, decent counterpunching. So, Bahamondes give him a lot of opportunities to find the button there. But, again, Bahamondes is very tough, and Zhu Rong did show a bit of wrestling, a bit of grappling in his last fight, and he might look to attack that going into this fight. That's gonna be his best way to neutralize a lot of the volume and the output of Bahamondes. But I really don't think that Zhu Rong's that good of a wrestler or grappler. He was able to get away with it because Jenkins had pretty bad defensive grappling for one, and Jenkins was gassing pretty hard after that first round. So the takedowns I think were much easier or they were coming by much easier that fight. He had a much easier time controlling Jenkins also in that fight. But again, Zhu Rong very young and training at ATT now. I do think that he'll be picking up a lot of new skills there. So I really like Bahamondes to win this. I think that he could probably keep this fight standing and be able to just touch up Zhu Rong for 3 rounds. I think a stoppage might be in the cards if he's doing enough damage. But, Zhurong's shown a lot of toughness, a lot of grit. And, if he could get some of the wrestling going, he could definitely slow down the pace a little bit. But I just don't think that it'll be enough for him to win the fight or enough to really sway the round. So the pick for me is going to be Bahamondes. I think the volume and the output is going to win it for him. I think he wins 30-27 decision. And moving along, we have Armen Petrosyan versus Gregory Rodrigues. And Rodrigues is the minus 185 favorite. Come back on Petrosyan is plus 165. And this should be a pretty exciting fight. Should be a banger, honestly. Both guys, I think, bring a lot of the same traits to the table. Both guys very heavy-handed, very aggressive in there with their striking, and both with a lot of knockout power. So this should be a pretty fun one for it as long as it lasts. But we'll start with Petrosyan first, the guy making his UFC debut. So like I mentioned before, very heavy-handed in there, very aggressive, likes to move forward and just chuck bombs at his opponent. He's got a pretty solid kicking game as well. He was able to finish Dmitry Minakov with a body kick, after, just being grinded on for most of the fight. So, it looks like his cardio's okay, and, he does seem to have power that translates, a little later in the fight. He is someone who's shown, some toughness and some grit in there. Some red flags, though, that I do want to mention is, he's doesn't have a ton of fights, and, he is fighting, generally lower level competition. Not terrible, though. I mean, some of the guys he's beaten aren't too bad in there, but, overall, at least compared to Rodrigues, the competition is maybe not as tough. And also is, Petrosyan is going to be moving down to 185. I believe that Petrosyan's fought most of his career at 200, which, I don't know if that's that big of a red flag, but it is something to be aware of. Going to see how that weight cut is for him, and, see how well he moves, because it looks like he does have a bit of a speed advantage at 205. Not sure how that's going to translate down at 185. I think it should be okay in this matchup, because honestly, I think that Rodrigues might be a little slow for the division. He's a bit plotty in there, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to be too big of an issue. I think it might be maybe just a small advantage on Petrosyan's side in terms of the hand speed. But moving on to Rodrigues, they've got a pretty similar frame and build and attributes. Also a very heavy-handed striker that will generally look to move forward in Rodrigues. We saw him piece up Todorovic for 3 rounds. Beat him pretty soundly there, and he's coming off of a very nice knockout of Jinh Park as well. I do have to say he was a little fortunate, being able to get the finish, because it looked like he was on the brink of gassing out pretty badly there, but he was able to land a couple bombs on Jinh Park before the gas tank completely got emptied there. That said, though, that fight was pretty high paced. For most of the fight, they were throwing hands, and there was a bit of grappling involved as well. On top of that, Rodrigues is a pretty well-muscled guy. So all things considered, I don't think his cardio is terrible, but, it is something to be aware of when it comes to these, high-paced fights. And another concern for Rodrigues, I think, is going to be the chin. He's only been knocked out twice, but, those were, kind of concerning knockouts, especially the most recent one to Jordan Williams, who I don't think is with the promotion anymore and has had, pretty poor performances out of that fight. But regardless, Rodrigues is coming off of, 2 very impressive performances. But, taking a look at this matchup, I do think that Petrosyan can bring a few things to the table that can really threaten Rodrigues here. I think mainly the aggression and the power. Rodrigues did really well against guys like Dusko and Park, because he was the one kind of setting the pace. Both of them were kind of, I guess, content with Rodrigues, moving forward and doing his thing. Whereas in the Jordan Williams fight, Williams was the one pressing forward, being real aggressive, getting in Rodrigues' face, and was able to just overwhelm him early. And I can kind of see Petrosyan doing that. Petrosyan's a very aggressive fighter in there. He's going to look to push the pace and get in his opponent's face, not give him a ton of room to breathe. And I do think that style could potentially cause problems for Rodrigues. That said, though, I think I'm still going to pick Rodrigues here to win, just because, he is the much more experienced fighter. And, Rodrigues has got, some power in his hands as well. So, if Petrosyan isn't careful, if he's too over aggressive, I could see Rodrigues potentially catch him. And, overall, Rodrigues is, I'd say, the more well-rounded fighter. Either I've seen a little more grappling from him, whereas with Petrosyan, I believe he's primarily just a striker in there. So overall, I do favor Rodrigues a little bit more, but I do feel the line is kind of wide. I would say Rodrigues should just be like a slight favorite here, mainly because of the well-roundedness and the experience. But stylistically, I could see Petrosyan giving Rodrigues some trouble. I think that, if Petrosyan's going to be the quicker guy in there, being more aggressive, I think he could maybe land some pretty heavy shots on Rodrigues early and potentially put him out. So, official pick for me is going to be Rodrigues, but I might put a small play on Petrosyan and maybe just a small play on Petrosyan by first round knockout, because I do think that's potentially in the cards here, especially, we've seen Rodrigues get knocked out before. We've seen his chin cracked, and I do think that Petrosyan, stylistically does pose some problems for Rodrigues, especially early. So official pick, you know what? I'm just going to go with Petrosyan here. I'm just going to go with Petrosyan round 1 knockout. So yeah, that's going to be my hot take for this card. Give me Petrosyan to pull off the upset here with the round 1 knockout. And in the next fight, we have Arman Tsarukyan versus Joel Alvarez. And Tsarukyan's going to be the minus 315 favorite, come back on Alvarez's plus 265. And this should be a pretty interesting prospect fight. Tsarukyan, definitely a hype prospect, and Alvarez is coming off of a TKO finish of Moises, and I do think that Alvarez is he's picking up a bit of steam here. But anyways, he's very dangerous on the feet. Alvarez is he's dangerous on the ground too, but on the feet he has shown a bit of power. Obviously coming off of the TKO of Moises. Granted, he was slamming those elbows into his his head there, so I don't know if that speaks too much to the power. But even before that, I thought, in the Duffy fight, he was, I think, clipping Duffy a little bit, because Duffy did shoot on Alvarez, but I think it's because Alvarez was giving Duffy a bit of trouble, and I think after the fight, it looked like Duffy might have gotten a cut, or, he got busted open or something. So I do think that Alvarez, is kind of dangerous on the feet. His striking is a bit unpolished still, but I do think if he's once he's refined his striking a little bit more, he'd be an even more dangerous prospect. But where Alvarez really does shine is going to be on the ground, actually. The guy's a very slick submission artist. He's very aggressive there. The issue, though, is he doesn't have great takedown defense. I think actually all of his opponents have been able to take him down. But the reason for that is, Alvarez is, he's very slippery on the ground, and he is someone who is very crafty there. He does not mind, attacking submissions off his back, which, so far it's worked for him. But, long term, I don't know if that's a super viable strategy. He's kind of gotten away with it, in the Bellawardo fight, even in the Duffy fight to an extent. And then, of course, in the Yakovlev fight, where I believe in both the Bellawardo and Yakovlev fight, he was just taken down at will. And, he kind of welcomed it because, he was attacking submissions right away. And then in the Duffy fight, he kind of pulled guillotine there. So all 3 times it ended up working, but I just don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be working in this fight, because Tsarukyan is a very strong, very top-heavy fighter who, does seem to be pretty positionally aware. So I don't know if Alvarez is going to be able to catch Tsarukyan here, but if anyone's going to do it, it's probably Alvarez. He has shown very slick jiu-jitsu there. But, moving on to Tsarukyan here, he's a very high-paced wrestler, someone who's, going to look to spam takedowns. And, he has shown he can hit like 8, 9, 10 takedowns in a fight. The top control isn't particularly great, but he has shown that he can shoot, multiple takedowns over the course of 3 rounds. And he has shown that, he could grapple at a pretty strong, heavy pace over the course of 3 rounds as well. So I think his cardio checks out. His stand-up is, it's decent. I don't think it's anything special, very meat and potato striking. But, I do think that because of his wrestling pace, he's able to kind of open up the striking game, for him. And, he's been able to really lean on that wrestling to win him fights. And the reason I think that Tsarukyan's submission defense should hold up is, he wasn't afraid to grapple in the guard of Ramos in that fight. There weren't too many exchanges there, but, he wasn't afraid to get into the guard of Ramos. And, Ramos wasn't able to submit him. And Ramos is a very high-level jiu-jitsu player. So, Overall, I definitely do favor Arman in this matchup here. On the feet, I think it's probably pretty close. I do favor the length of Alvarez. Alvarez got really good kicks as well, and he does use the elbows very effectively. And I don't think Alvarez is some like stud striker or anything, but he does use that length well, and he does seem to have a bit of power. But where I do think Arman's going to be able to really take over is going to be in the wrestling. Because like I said before, Alvarez is someone who will, fight off his back. And I just don't know if that's going to be a very successful strategy against Tsarukyan here. I suspect that if that happens, we're just going to see Tsarukyan just kind of lay on top of him and get a ton of control time. Tsarukyan does have to be careful, though, because, again, Alvarez does pose a submission threat. That said, though, I'm going to pick Tsarukyan to win this. I think he could win, a pretty dominant decision. We saw, lesser grapplers like Bellawardo and even Yakovlev for a little bit have success in the wrestling. And, I don't think Bellawardo and Yakovlev are really good fighters, whereas with Tsarukyan, I think he's a top 15, top 10 fighter for sure. And something else I do want to add, I do think that Tsarukyan's going to be able to match the physicality of Alvarez a lot better. Guys like Bellawardo and Yakovlev are, they seem kind of small, a little weak for the division compared to Alvarez, but, Tsarukyan's a very, big, strong guy for the division as well. So I do think that Tsarukyan's going to have a lot more success, on top than some of these other guys like Bellawardo and Yakovlev. So the official pick for me is going to be is Tsarukyan here. Not too thrilled with the price tag. Might just stick him in some small parlays, mainly because I do think that Alvarez does pose a few threats on the feet and on the ground. So, I don't think that Tsarukyan's like a complete lock to win. I do think that Alvarez has got some paths to victory, but I do think those are pretty narrow paths. He's going to have to catch Tsarukyan, which he definitely can do, but I do think most of the time we see Tsarukyan just grind him out to a pretty dominant victory here. So give me Tsarukyan and give me Tsarukyan by decision. And moving along, we have Jinh Kim versus Priscila Cachoeira, and Kim's the minus 180 favorite. Come back on Cachoeira is plus 155, and this should actually be a pretty fun fight. Both fighters generally looking to stand and bang in there. So I do think we're going to get a pretty fun back and forth striking fight here. But we'll take a look at Kim first. Yeah, like I said before, primarily a striker. She's got pretty decent output. I actually think she's got, pretty solid, output for the women's division, actually. She does look to generally counter her opponents, but I have seen her look to trade in the pocket. Defensively, she's very hittable. Pretty bad defensive grappling as well. I think her takedown defense is pretty horrendous. And she has shown that she could get stuck on her back as well. I mean, she made Antonina Shevchenko look like a good grappler in their fight. But anyways, Kim just, decent striker, but, pretty bad defensive grappling and pretty bad defensive tendencies all around. So, overall, I just say she's a decent offensive striker. But on the other hand, we have Cachoeira, who's, I think, in a pretty similar situation. She's a bit of a marauder on the feet, likes to just plod forward and throw heat at her opponents. Pretty basic offensively, honestly, but, she can crack. She's got a bit of power in there, but like Kim, she is very hittable. But that said, though, she is pretty tough, and, she's called the zombie girl because she likes to move forward, just eat punches and throw down. The cardio, I don't think, is particularly good. She's gone the distance before in the Carolina and McCann fight, but, she was slowing down pretty significantly, past that, first round and a half. I think in both those fights, she had a decent first round, and then both McCann and Carolina were able to catch up in that second and third round. I know she does have like a round two finish on Mazany, but I think Mazany just really gassed herself out looking for those takedowns as opposed to Cachoeira just having phenomenal cardio. So I will say this about Cachoeira, she does seem to be able to fight through the fatigue pretty well, and she is an absolute dog in there. That said, though, she is someone who I think will slow down as the fight progresses. But taking a look at this matchup, prior to the tape, I thought that Kim was going to be a smash spot here, with how hittable Cachoeira is, and the fact that Cachoeira has really not looked particularly great in most of her fights. But, I did the tape, and I remembered just how bad Kim really was as well. Honestly, I'd say Kim is just a slightly better version of Cachoeira in there. She's extremely hittable. She likes to kind of just box in the pocket. I don't think her footwork is particularly great. She's got really long reach, but I don't think she uses it all that well, and I really don't think that Kim's got that much power. I do think she's got decent output and stuff, but outside of that, I don't think she's got too many advantages over Kim. Just a quick little stat, to kind of reinforce that a little bit, and also a little bit of MMA math. But both of these fighters went up against McCann, and McCann was actually able to land more significant strikes on Kim than she was on Cachoeira, and I know a lot of people kind of meme Cachoeira as being just a punching bag and being a very low level fighter, but I really don't think that Kim is too far off from her, if I'm being honest. You look at some of the wins Kim's had, pretty low level fighters as well, and both of her wins by decision were split decisions. Yeah, so they were pretty close fights regardless of how you actually scored the fight. Just because I feel the optics for Kim is not that great. She doesn't have a ton of power, but she takes a ton of shots. So I feel like a lot of her fights tend to play out pretty closely with just how hittable she is. And I have a feeling with this fight, it's going to play out pretty close as well. We might see Kim pull away later in the fight for the volume, but I think this fight's going to be pretty close. Kim, again, is pretty content to trade in the pocket, and I don't know if you want to be doing that against Cachoeira here, because Cachoeira, while she is a pretty basic striker, she will throw down, and she does seem to have some power, so Cachoeira could potentially swing rounds with some power shots. And something I do want to mention is in the Carolina fight, Carolina actually did a pretty decent job of staying on the outside of Cachoeira, making Cachoeira chase her, and be able to just kind of outpoint her that way. Whereas in this fight, I really don't know if Kim's got the footwork to do that. I think Kim's kind of just gonna look to stay in front of Cachoeira and look to counter her. But if that happens, I could definitely see Cachoeira just doing a little bit more in terms of landing the heavy shots. So I do feel this fight is going to play out pretty close for like the fifth time I've said this, but official pick, I think I'm going to go with Kim. I really don't think either fight is that good, but maybe Kim is maybe a little sharper on the feet. And I do think that, come the second and third round, we're going to see maybe the volume start to pick up from her, because Kim is someone who generally does build a bit as the fight progresses, whereas with Cachoeira, she will slow down. But again, Cachoeira does a decent job of, fighting through the fatigue. But I do think once she starts to slow down, she's going to be even more hittable. So, I'm gonna go with Kim here. I think she wins a very close decision. It could even be a split decision, but I do see this going to the scorecards here, because Cachoeira is super tough, as we've seen before. Only way you're getting out of there is if you're tapping her out. But I don't know if Kim's submission game is that good, and Kim has really shown no takedown game either. So I do think that we likely see this go to a decision. I think if there's any finishing upside, it's probably going to be with Cachoeira. She could chuck bombs in there, but Kim's shown pretty good durability as well. So yeah, give me Kim here, but I think the play might just be fight goes to decision. Moving along, we have Misha Cirkunov versus Wellington Turman, and Cirkunov's the -120 favorite. Come back on Turman is +100. So very interesting fight here. I do believe Turman is going to be coming in short notice for this fight. But we'll start with Cirkunov first. So, Cirkunov going to be his second fight at 185. He's a very powerful grappler. The guy's just ridiculously thick. And honestly, I have no idea how he made 185, but somehow he did it. The guy was really thick even for a 205er. And at 185, he's just fucking cut up. But anyways, he's very strong. With his submission grappling, he's able to bully a lot of his opponents, into submission, just kind of muscle them to the ground and just, really work those strongman chokes. I do believe he's got one finish, by knockout, where he's just pounding his opponent out. But most of the time, the guy's looking to just rip his opponent to the ground and, looking for the submission there. However, I do have to say, Cirkunov does struggle a bit when he isn't able to get that grappling going, or when he gets extended. Pretty much all of his wins have been inside the distance. Anytime he's not able to get the finish, actually, he tends to lose, whether it's by decision or him getting finished, which leads me to my next point here is, Cirkunov, I think, does have a pretty questionable chin. He's been knocked out on a number of occasions at 205, and him moving down to 185, I think might be even worse for him, because that's even more weight that he has to cut, and it could be even worse for his chin overall. But yeah, I do think the move to 185 might be a little bit questionable. Kind of hard to tell though, because he's only had one fight there, but in his one fight against Jocko, he really did not look all that good. The output was really low. He looked quite a bit slower in there. I thought, at 185, he'd just be the much, bigger, stronger guy in there, would be able to bully guys even harder with the strength. But, I don't think he's got the cardio to match. And, going down to 185, I think has taken a bit of a hit on his cardio as well. So the move to 185 could potentially have been a mistake in the sense that maybe his strengths have not completely translated, whereas I feel like some of the weaknesses may have gotten exemplified or, exacerbated a little bit here at 185. But, I'm going to give him another fight here to really prove himself, whether or not he belongs, at 185 or if, he's better off at 205. But, yeah, and, the UFC's given him, very winnable fights at 185 as well. Jocko, I thought was a very winnable fight. And once again, they're giving him a bit of a softball here in Turman because Turman, in my opinion, is just not a very good fighter. I really don't know what he does well, honestly. I think he's got a solid, grappling base, but that's really, we have yet to really see that in action. He's gone to it a little bit, but hasn't had really extended success there. He took Roberson down, but even Roberson, who's a kickboxer, had a bit of success, just sweeping and reversing him, and even I think got a bit of control time on Turman as well. And his striking is really nothing to write home about either. He got knocked out by Andre Sanchez, who the guy's a wrestler, and then most recently is coming off of a very close, split decision win over Alvi. Granted, I did think he won that fight. It was the point deduction that made it a bit closer than it should have been. I do think he won, very clearly on the cards. But regardless, it was still a pretty close fight. And, fighting that close with Alvi is just not a good look at this point. So overall, I just really don't think that Turman's any good, honestly. I mean, let me know what you guys think because, how does Turman win this? What does he do well here? I mean, I guess this could potentially be a very low output sort of fight on the feet, and it could be close, similar to the Jocko fight. But honestly, I just don't rate the striking of Turman all that highly, and I do think that Jocko's the better striker between the two. The grappling, I think, might be a bit of a wash. Turman's actually shown pretty good takedown defense, but I don't know if anyone's really aggressively tried to take him down. Bruno Silva was able to get the ground and pound over Turman, but I believe it was a reversal. So I don't think his takedown defense has really truly been tested. So I do think that maybe if Cirkunov does go to the wrestling and the grappling, he could have a chance here. I'm not completely sold on the jiu-jitsu of Turman either. So. I do like Cirkunov in this spot. The only issue is Cirkunov is a little unreliable of a fighter, and at 185 even more so. But regardless, I do still feel he's the better fighter overall. And, at minus 120, I might actually take a poke on him because we're not talking about laying ridiculous juice on Cirkunov here. I do think that overall he is the better fighter. It's just that he can be a bit unreliable at times. And, you could say the same about Turman. Turman's just as unreliable and he's a worse fighter. So, to give me, minus 120 to fade him, I think it's worth a small shot here. So, yeah, I'm going to give Cirkunov one more chance here at 185. And, minus 120, really not a terrible price tag. But really, it's just more so a fade on Turman as well. So, give me Cirkunov here and give me Cirkunov to win in round 1 via submission. And in the main event, we have Islam Makhachev versus Bobby Green. And Makhachev's the minus 700 favorite. Come back on Green is plus 450. And honestly, really bummed out the original matchup didn't go through. That was going to be, I think, a pretty high-level grappling affair between two guys at the top of the division. And, much respect for Green for coming in short notice on this fight. But I do think that stylistically this is somewhat favorable matchup for Makhachev. And ultimately, I do feel the previous matchup was just a much more compelling fight between the two. But anyways, at least we get to see Makhachev in action here. So we'll start with Makhachev first, the big favorite here. We all kind of know the deal with him. He's a very dominant wrestler. His striking, I don't think is particularly great. It's not terrible or anything, but, it's kind of serviceable on the feet. I do actually think Makhachev's got, kind of sneaky power. He was able to obviously knock out Tebow, but, he was able to hurt Ramos on the feet as well. So I think in terms of just raw power, I definitely think that, Makhachev's got it. But the thing is, his striking is just very meat and potatoes. And against someone like Bobby Green, who's, just a very high-level boxer himself, someone who's, very seasoned in there, it's going to be hard for Makhachev to land something clean, maybe outside of just like a big overhand right. I don't know if Makhachev is going to be able to land too many heavy shots on Green, but of course, Makhachev is a very reliable wrestler. He's going to look to eventually get the fight to the ground. He's got, very good wrestling, obviously. But, when he is on top of his opponents, he does have, really good control there. I'd say Makhachev is someone who generally does prioritize the control over the submissions and even the ground and pound. That said, though, it's not like he's just, laying preying on his opponents. He will look to advance positions. He will look to lay the ground and pound and do a bit of damage. But I believe most of the time his top priority is just maintaining that control and just being really heavy on top of his opponents. And on top of that, I do think his cardio checks out. He's only had one 5-round fight before, and that was against Moises, where he was able to get that 4th round finish, which, pretty good look, honestly. Moises is a really strong grappler himself, but, even outside of that, Makhachev's shown that he could wrestle pretty aggressively for 3 rounds at least and not be super fatigued. So I think over the course of 5 rounds, he could spread it out a little bit more and definitely be able to put on at least like a 4-round wrestling performance here. And he's going to be going up against Bobby Green, who is a pretty well-rounded fighter himself, definitely more on the boxing heavy end, but, Green is someone who can wrestle as well, has shown pretty good takedown defense, but, obviously not going to be on the level of someone like Makhachev. On the feet, though, I definitely do favor Green. He's very slick on the feet, very good volume. Not a lot of power, though, right? The biggest knock always on Green was that he's a bit more of a point fighter on the feet, very slick head movement, very good defensively, lots of output, but he just doesn't seem to have that fight-changing power. Of course, he knocked out Iaquinta, but, very much an anomaly fight, in my opinion. But by and large, Green is someone who will look to just kind of to jab at opponents, keep up a high work rate and just outpoint opponents. But, for this matchup, his takedown defense is very much going to get tested here. Same with his get-up game and even submission defense. But, it's kind of hard to really get a good gauge on, where that is for Green at this point in his career, because the last time I'd say he fought an aggressive wrestler was, Clay Guida back in 2020, which is almost a couple of years ago, right? About a bit over a year and a half ago. And even Guida was able to take Green down a few times and get a decent amount of control time on him. So, not a very positive outlook there. But even before that, Green hasn't actually fought too many wrestlers. For the most part, he's fought a lot of strikers. If you want to go back to when he last fought another wrestler or someone with, pretty aggressive wrestling before Guido, you'd have to go all the way back to maybe the Josh Thompson fight, and that was in 2014. So quite a while ago, and not a fight you could put too much stock in. So, I think this is going to be a pretty tough fight for Green, honestly. He's going to be coming in short notice, which, I'm not really concerned about the conditioning of Green. He only fought like about 2 weeks ago, so he'll probably be in shape. But, when you fight someone like Makhachev, someone who's as aggressive with their grappling and wrestling, you definitely need a full camp. As we saw in the Hooker fight, Hooker came in short notice for that fight and pretty much just got peeled to the ground and submitted early, super early in the first round. So I don't think it's an issue of conditioning or cardio or anything. It's just the fact that just not having a full camp to really work on the takedown defense, work on the get-ups and the submission defense. So, while I don't doubt the conditioning that Bobby Green is in, he just hasn't really been training to fight someone like Makhachev, up to this point. Prior to this, he was training to fight someone like Haqparast, who's a boxer, and, 2 weeks is just not enough time to really prepare for someone of Makhachev's caliber. So I really see Makhachev just being able to take Green down and just dominating him there. I think we're going to see a finish here, likely a submission, probably somewhat early-ish in the fight. I don't know if he's going to just run through Green like he did against Hooker, but I wouldn't be completely surprised. Green does seem to have, decent takedown defense and, pretty good submission defense. He did show pretty good awareness against Moises in that fight and was able to fight his way out of a few submission attempts. So I do think we might see Green put up a bit more resistance early in the fight, but as the fight progresses, I do see Makhachev eventually finding the submission. I just don't think that Green is quite prepared for the aggression and the pressure that Makhachev is going to bring. And even with a full camp, I don't know if Green's going to be able to do it either. Like, honestly, if you think about it, how does Green realistically win this fight? And, he's definitely not going to be submitting Makhachev. Is he going to knock out Makhachev? I don't think so. Green, again, isn't like a big power puncher. He's more of like a point striker. Maybe if, he goes aggressive early, just puts everything in his shots early, he might be able to find the chin of Makhachev, but I don't think that's super likely. So I guess the most realistic path to victory for Green is if he's able to keep this fight standing and just outpoint Makhachev on the feet, which... out of all of the paths to victory for Green, it's probably the most likely, right? Maybe he's able to fend off a few takedowns, in 2 or 3 of the rounds and keep it standing and just outstrike Makhachev. But again, I don't think that's too likely either. Makhachev is a very aggressive and reliable wrestler. He will look to chain wrestle as well. So, if he doesn't get you down that first attempt, he's going to keep looking to get the fight there, especially in this matchup where he does have a pretty clear disadvantage on the feet. So, I really think that Makhachev is going to be able to take Green down, really just grind him down and eventually get the finish. So, official prediction is going to be Makhachev round 2 or round 3 submission. I think that first round we see Green put up a good effort. He might be able to defend a couple takedowns. I eventually see Makhachev getting this fight to the ground, and maybe he's able to fight off a few submission attempts. But I just see the pressure and the aggression of the wrestling being a little too much for Green. And come the second and third round, we're going to see him slow down enough for Makhachev to eventually find the finish. So I like Makhachev here. I think he gets it done by submission. Probably going to look to put him in a couple parlays. Nothing crazy, because at minus 700, you're really not increasing the odds all that much. But I really do like Makhachev to win inside the distance here.